Welcome to the Hot News Channel, where we strip away the noise to analyze today's breaking stories. It is January 27th, 2026. I'm your host, here to lay out the hard facts, the numbers, and the movements on the ground.
And I'm here to help you understand what those numbers actually mean for your life, your wallet, and, well, the future of the world. Because today isn't just another news cycle. If you're paying attention to the signals, we are, I think, living through a historical hinge point.
That is no exaggeration. We have a convergence of three massive storylines hitting the wires simultaneously this morning. It really feels like the world is holding its breath.
It does.
First, we have the hard data coming out of U.S. Central Command regarding the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group. It has officially arrived in the Middle East, and President Trump is not mincing words. He is calling it an Armada, bigger than anything we saw with Venezuela.
But while everyone is, staring at the horizon looking for ships, the financial tectonic plates are shifting right beneath our feet. We absolutely need to talk about what is happening with the U.S. dollar. The dollar index has crashed 1.5% in a month to a 4-month low, but the real story, the story that should have everyone sitting up straight, is gold. It has just smashed through the ceiling, hitting $5,000 an ounce. That is a screaming alarm bell from the global markets.
A huge psychological barrier broke in there, and if that wasn't enough, we have the leak. The Board of Peace documents have surfaced following the Davos summit, and they expose a plan that looks a lot less like a peace treaty and a lot more like, a real estate acquisition. We are talking about the privatization of Gaza.
Exactly. The mission for this deep dive, then, is to connect these dots. We're going to show you how the military escalation in the Persian Gulf, the economic warfare being waged by the U.S. Treasury, and the suppression of dissent we're seeing in Western democracies are not separate stories.
They're not.
No. They are one single narrative about a desperate attempt to hold on to a unipolar world order that is, clearly slipping away.
So let's start with the military situation, because the hardware is in the water. According to confirmed reports from U.S. Central Command and President Trump's own public statements, the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group is now on station in the Middle East.
And let's be clear about what that actually means. When we say a carrier strike group, we aren't just talking about a big boat. It's a term that it really undersells the reality. We're talking about 100,000 tons of diplomacy.
100,000 tons of diplomacy. I like that.
Yeah. You have the carrier itself, which is a floating air base housing an air wing of roughly 90 aircraft. But then you also have the guided missile cruisers, the destroyers, the attack submarines underneath. It is a floating city designed purely to project power.
Right. We are looking at a full deployment, F-15s, F-35s, mid-air refueling tankers, and expanded naval patrols. Trump stated explicitly, we have a big flotilla going in that direction. It's an armada. He compared it to the force built up against Venezuela, but he emphasized this is bigger. The official narrative here, the line coming out of the White House, is deterrence. They are saying this is about stopping Iran's nuclear ambitions and, quote, stabilizing the region after weeks of protests inside Iran.
But if you dig into the analysis from military experts who aren't on the payroll, the people who don't have a dog in this fight, the picture changes completely. We need to look at the assessment from Scott Ritter, the former UN weapons inspector. He's looking at this buildup, and he is not seeing deterrence. He's seeing a tripwire for World War III.
Ritter has been very vocal about the capabilities on the other side. There is this narrative in the West, we hear it all the time on cable news, that Iran is just a paper tiger, that their tech is, outdated. But Ritter calls Iran the king of the region. Why is he so confident in their capabilities? What are they seeing that maybe the public isn't?
It's because the nature of naval warfare has changed, and the U.S. public, I think, hasn't really been updated on the new patch notes, so to speak. Ritter points out that Iran has the capability to terminate all energy production in the region.
Terminate it completely.
Completely. Think about what that does to the global economy.
Yeah.
We just pause and imagine it. If the Strait of Hormuz is closed, if the oil fields in Saudi Arabia and the UAE are struck, we aren't talking about a recession where your portfolio takes a bit of a hit. We're talking about a global depression overnight.
Wow.
Supply chains freeze. Energy costs don't just go up, they triple, maybe quadruple. The entire system just stops.
And there is a specific piece of media that has everyone on edge. Iranian state media released I guess you'd call it a simulation, depicting a Fatah hypersonic missile destroying a U.S. aircraft carrier. Now, U.S. officials immediately dismiss this as propaganda. They say, look, it's a computer-generated video. It proves nothing. And honestly, looking at it, it does look like a video game. Why should we take that seriously?
because the dismissal completely misses the point. Whether that specific video is CGI or not is frankly irrelevant to the physics of the engagement. The analysis from Scott Ritter and also from Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, who, knows armored and naval warfare inside and out, is the volume of anti-ship missiles Iran possesses is enough to overwhelm the Aegis defense systems.
Okay, let's unpack that for a second. The Aegis system is the shield, right? It's the radar and interceptor system on our destroyers that's designed to shoot down incoming missiles.
Correct. It's a very sophisticated, very effective shield. But every shield has a saturation point. The Aegis system tracks targets and it fires interceptors. But if Iran fires, say, 100 missiles simultaneously, a mix of drones, subsonic cruise missiles, and these new hypersonic Fata missiles that travel at, Mach 5, Mach 10?
Unbelievable speeds.
Yeah. The system simply cannot track and engage all of them at once. It's a math problem. If you have 50 interceptors and 100 incoming threats, 50 threats are going to get through. It's just a matter of arithmetic.
So it's not about the quality of the shield, it's about the quantity of the arrows.
Exactly. And Scott Ritter made a chilling assessment. He said, the U.S. must be prepared to lose a carrier. He said, and I quote, the Abraham Lincoln would already be sunk if Iran had decided to strike preemptively during a real conflict.
That destroys the unsinkable myth that so much of American naval power relies on. We operate on the assumption that these carriers are invincible fortresses that can just park anywhere.
And that assumption is a relic of the 1990s. It's outdated thinking. In the 90s, we could park a carrier off the coast of Iraq or Serbia and bomb with impunity because nobody could shoot back. Iran can shoot back.
Yeah.
And not just at the carrier. They made it clear they would target all U.S. bases in the region.
And Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, you mentioned him, he adds another layer to this. He warns about the accident factor.
Right, the fog of war. Exactly. When you put that much firepower, an armada, as Trump himself calls it, into a confined space like the Persian Gulf, which is essentially a narrow bathtub, and you have Iranian drones and U.S. drones flying in the same airspace, you are relying on 19-year-old sailors and radar operators to make split-second decisions.
Under immense pressure.
Immense pressure. Was that blip on the radar a bird, a commercial airliner, or an incoming attack? If you guess wrong, you start a war. The margin for error is zero. It's an incredibly dangerous situation that I don't think is being fully appreciated.
We also need to talk about the strategy here. This feels like the Trump Doctrine 2.0. We have analysis from Alex Cristoforo and Alastair Crooke, the former MI6 agent. They describe a pattern, the carrot and stick. Trump claims he stopped 837 hangings in Iran just by threatening them, saying, it'll make what we did to your nuclear look like peanuts. Then, in the same breath, he says he wants a deal.
It's the art of the deal applied to geopolitics. Maximum pressure to force a negotiation on his terms. But Alastair Crooke argues that Trump is miscalculating the year. This isn't 2020. This isn't the Venezuela operation where you can just park some ships off the coast and hope the government collapses.
So what's different now?
The region, as Crooke puts it, is honeycombed with missiles. It's not just Iran anymore. Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, the militias in Iraq, they all have sophisticated missile capabilities now that they didn't have in this quantity a few years ago. And here's the fascinating part. The Arab states are terrified.
The Gulf regimes, but aren't they our allies? Normally they cheer when we bring the carriers in. They see it as protection.
Not this time. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, they are signaling frantically that they want out. They're telling Washington, please do not start this from our backyard. They know that if the U.S. launches strikes from their soil or even uses their airspace, their glass cities are the first things to shatter.
Right. Dubai, Riyadh.
Exactly. These are modern miracles of construction, but they are incredibly fragile. They are seeing the Armada not as protection, but as a giant bullseye painted on their backs.
So Trump might be bluffing for a better deal, attempting to leverage military might for diplomatic gain, but he's bluffing with a loaded gun pointed at the global energy supply.
Precisely. It's a game of chicken where the other driver has cut the brake lines. And while the ships are sailing, the economic war is already hitting targets. This brings us to the financial fallout, which is, I would argue, just as volatile as the military situation.
Let's pivot to the money. The Financial Times is reporting the U.S. dollar index has crashed to a 4-month low. That's a 1.5% drop in a month, which is a big move for a currency index. But the headline grabber, the thing my phone has been blowing up about all morning, is gold, $5,000 an ounce. I remember when $2,000 was considered a major psychological ceiling. What is driving this?
It is the ultimate vote of no confidence. When you see gold hit 5,000 while the dollar drops, it's not just about inflation anymore. We are seeing a flight from the dollar. You have to look at the analysis from Sean Fu, who tracks these macro trends very, very closely. He points out that central banks are actively dumping U.S. treasuries.
Okay, explain that for the listeners who might not follow the bond market. What does it mean when central banks dump treasuries? Why is that such a big deal?
Okay, so U.S. treasuries government debt have traditionally been the piggy bank of the world for decades. If China or Japan or Brazil makes a profit from trade, they store that profit in U.S. treasuries because it's considered the safest, most liquid asset on the planet.
Right, it's the bedrock.
It was. But now they are selling them. And not just selling them, they're swapping them for something tangible. Global gold reserves have now hit $5 trillion. For the first time in modern history, central banks are holding more value in physical gold than they are in U.S. treasuries, which sit at around $3.9 trillion. They're literally swapping the American IOU for bars of physical metal.
That is a massive shift. That's a sea change in global finance. Why are they doing this? Why dump what was supposed to be the safest asset on Earth?
Because they are becoming toxic assets. This is the direct result of the weaponization of the currency. I mean, look at it from their perspective. If you're a foreign nation, why would you hold an asset that the U.S. government can freeze or confiscate if you disagree with their foreign policy?
Right, we saw that with Russia.
We saw it with Russia. We froze $300 billion of their reserves. We saw it with Afghanistan. We froze their central bank assets. Now, every country on Earth is looking at that and saying, wait a second, if I don't agree with the U.S. on Iran or Israel or Taiwan or whatever the issue of the day is, will my money just disappear?
So the reliability of the dollar is being sacrificed for short-term political leverage?
Exactly. And this connects directly to a really stunning admission we got from Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. This clip from Davos is circulating everywhere, and it should be. He didn't just admit to economic warfare, he bragged about it.
I saw that. He looked incredibly pleased with himself, which was unsettling.
It was a confession. Professor Jeffrey Sachs analyzed this, and he was, just appalled. Bessent explicitly stated that the U.S. Treasury used economic statecraft, that's his euphemism, to destroy the Iranian rial. He said, with a smirk, that this caused the currency to collapse, caused a dollar shortage, and that's what forced people into the streets.
He literally said it worked because in December their economy collapsed, and this is why the people took to the street. He frames it as a clean, bloodless victory. No shots fired.
But Jeffrey Sachs rebuts that powerfully. He classifies this as illegal warfare under the UN Charter, and probably under the U.S. Constitution, too. I mean, think about what destroying a currency actually means for people on the ground.
It's not an abstract number on a screen.
No. It means the price of bread triples. It means life-saving medicine can't be imported. It means the heating gets turned off in the winter because you can't afford fuel. You are deliberately starving a civilian population to trigger a political overthrow.
And Sachs pointed out Bessent's background. He used to work for George Soros and helped break the Bank of England in '92.
Yeah, that's a key piece of context. For those who don't know, George Soros famously shorted the British pound, betting it would fail, and made $1 billion while the British economy tanked. Bessent was his right-hand man for that. He comes from that world.
So he's shorting a nation. That's a terrifying concept.
It is. He's taking that hedge fund mentality where the only thing that matters is profit and leverage and applying it to sovereign nations. But when you short a nation, people starve. Sachs called it lawless and thuggish. He argues that there is no moral difference between bombing a power plant and destroying the currency used to buy fuel for that power plant. The result is the same.
Yeah.
The civilians freeze.
And the blowback from this is real. We are seeing reports that even European pension funds are quietly pulling out of U.S. treasuries. Sean Fu mentioned that Bessent actually mocked Denmark for their holdings. But the reality is, nobody wants to be the last one holding the bag.
No, of course not. Even Germany is panicking. There are reports of German lawmakers demanding their physical gold back from the U.S. Federal Reserve vaults in New York. For decades, Germany stored its gold in New York for safekeeping. It was just a given. Now they want it back in Frankfurt.
Why the sudden urgency?
The logic is simple. If you don't hold it, you don't own it. And in this environment, trust is gone. The Armada might be the distraction, but the loss of the dollar's status as the global reserve currency, that is the defeat that changes history. If the dollar collapses, the U.S. can't fund its military, can't fund its imports, and the entire empire of bases evaporates.
And while the economy is being weaponized, there's a new plan for the Middle East being rolled out that sounds like something out of science fiction, but the documents are real. This is The Board of Peace.
This is perhaps the most dystopian element of the current news cycle.
Okay.
It's really something else. We have leaked documents obtained by Dropsite News, specifically the reporting of Sharif Abdel-Quddus, and some really detailed analysis from Chris Hedges.
Trump launched this Board of Peace at Davos. The lineup is, well, it's eclectic, to say the least. You have Trump as chairman, Jared Kushner, Tony Blair, Benjamin Netanyahu, and a guy named Martin Edelman. I'll be honest, I had to look up Martin Edelman. Who is he?
Martin Edelman is the key to understanding this whole thing. He's known as Manhattan's man in Abu Dhabi. He isn't a diplomat. He isn't a peace negotiator or humanitarian. He's a high-end real estate lawyer who's deeply, deeply connected to Emirati wealth and global development projects.
So they build the things.
He builds luxury things. The fact that he is on the board tells you everything. This is not a humanitarian mission. It is a real estate development project.
Kushner literally gave a PowerPoint presentation showing a Gaza Riviera. He had renderings of high-rises, marinas, luxury waterfront properties, all built over what is currently rubble and mass graves. It looked like a pitch for a new resort in Miami or Dubai.
The audacity is just breathtaking. But let's look at the leaked resolution details, because that's where the mechanics are. This document outlines a supreme leadership body with total executive authority over Gaza. It completely bypasses any form of Palestinian governance. It replaces the UN with a corporate authoritarian board.
And there's no mention of a Palestinian state. No sovereignty.
Zero. None. It's not in the vocabulary of this plan. The document treats the land purely as an asset to be managed and the people as a problem to be contained.
And the details on how they plan to manage the population are chilling. The documents describe planned communities or humanitarian cities. Now, to the average listener, planned community sounds nice. It sounds like the suburbs.
It's Orwellian language. These are effectively biometric cages. The plan is to cleave Gaza in half. They call it the yellow line. On one side, you have the so-called Hamas zone, which is likely intended to be a free fire zone or slated for settler development later on. On the other side, you have the free zone.
But it's not really free.
Not at all. To get into the free zone, where the food and housing are, Palestinians must submit to intense biometric screening, iris scans, DNA, facial recognition, and agree to live in these specific high-surveillance compounds.
So you have to trade your privacy and your freedom of movement just for bread.
Correct. It sounds like a prison disguised as a condo complex. Every movement is tracked. Access to resources is contingent on good behavior, which will be defined by the occupying board. It's the privatization of occupation.
Jeremy Corbyn and Ahmed Al-Najjar have been analyzing the human cost here. While Kushner is showing slides of Dubai-style cities, 2 million people are currently starting. Israel is blocking building materials right now as we speak.
And that's the scam that Ahmed Al-Najjar points out. He calls it a real estate deal built on a graveyard. He notes that you can't build high-rises when you're actively blocking concrete and steel from entering. So the reconstruction is a fantasy used to sell the political solution, while the reality on the ground is starvation.
And the board itself.
Al-Najjar points out that the board includes absolutely no humanitarian experts. Yeah. Not one. It's real estate moguls and, as he puts it, dictators in waiting.
I have to play devil's advocate here, though. Some people listening might say, look, the situation in Gaza is hell on earth right now. Is this better than the current chaos? At least it's a plan. At least someone is talking about rebuilding houses. Why is this worse than the status quo?
That's the trap, isn't it? Of course, anything looks better than active bombardment. But this plan isn't designed to restore Palestinian life. It's designed to end Palestinian existence as a political people. It's ethnic cleansing rebranded as urban development.
How so?
If you look at the yellow line concept, it essentially accepts the permanent partition of Gaza and the removal of Palestinian sovereignty forever. It turns the survivors into tenants in a corporate fiefdom run by the very people who bombed their homes. That isn't stability. That is a pressure cooker for the next century of conflict. You are creating a permanent underclass with absolutely nothing left to lose.
Speaking of pressure cookers, we have to look at the front that is being ignored because of all this news in the Middle East, Ukraine. While the world watches the Persian Gulf, the situation on the ground in Ukraine is, by all credible accounts, collapsing.
It is the forgotten front, but the data is stark. We have analysis from Stanislav Krapivnik, a former U.S. Army officer, and from Alexander Mercouris. And the numbers they are citing are catastrophic for Ukraine. In January 2026 alone, Russian forces have captured 500 square kilometers.
500. That is a massive amount of territory compared to the stalemate we saw for years. I remember in 2024, the lines barely moved by meters. Now they are moving by kilometers a day. The focus seems to be on Zaporozhye. Russian forces are reportedly 12 to 14 kilometers from the city.
And we need to understand the geography here. Zaporozhye isn't a village. It's a major industrial hub, a city of 700,000 people. It sits on the Dnieper River. If Russian forces are that close, they can bring the entire city under tube artillery fire. The logistics for the Ukrainian army in the entire south are being strangled as we speak.
And Kripivnik argues that the front is collapsing not just because of a lack of ammo, but because of what he calls the meat grinder strategy. Explain the meat grinder concept. It's a grim term.
It's a strategy of attrition. It's brutal. Instead of trying to take land quickly with risky maneuvers, the Russian strategy for the last year has been to force Ukraine to fight for every inch, inflicting maximum casualties. Kripivnik notes that the Ukrainian army has been bled white. The experienced officers are gone, the NCOs are gone. The men manning the trenches now are often older, forcibly conscripted, and very poorly trained.
So they're running out of trained soldier.
They're running out of bodies. The attrition rates have reached a tipping point where the Ukrainian army simply cannot man the lines anymore. There are reports of gaps in the defense that are kilometers wide because there is simply nobody left to stand there.
And we had that brief mention of the Arashnik missile. This is the new Russian hypersonic capability. Is this different from what they had before? Is this a game changer?
It changes the calculus significantly. The Arashnik is a lighter, more tactical hypersonic missile. It's not a strategic city buster. It allows Russia to strike decision-making centers, bunkers, command posts, radar stations with almost zero warning. If you can decapitate the local command structure with impunity, the ability of the Ukrainian army to sustain an organized resistance just degrades rapidly. You end up with isolated units who can't communicate, and they just get surrounded and destroyed.
Yet, looking at the diplomatic side, the disconnect is just mind-boggling. Zelensky is still demanding U.S. Senate ratified security guarantees from Trump. He wants a binding treaty.
Which Alexander Mercouris correctly points out is a diplomatic charade. It's pure fantasy. The U.S. Senate has never wanted to give binding guarantees to Ukraine, not under Biden, and certainly not under Trump. Trump views NATO with skepticism. He's not going to sign a piece of paper that legally binds the U.S. to go to nuclear war for the Donbass. It's just not going to happen.
So there's a total disconnect.
A total disconnect between the reality on the battlefield, which is a slow-motion collapse, and the political reality in the diplomatic offices in Kyiv.
So we have a collapsing front in Europe, an Armada in the Middle East, and a currency crisis at home. This brings us to the question: how do governments keep their populations in line when the news is this bad, when the wars are failing and the money is losing its value?
You shut them up. This is the fifth and perhaps the most personal part of our deep dive, the war on dissent. You can't have people asking why the gold price is $5,000 or why the peace plan looks like a prison camp. So you criminalize the question.
And we have 3 case studies that are frankly terrifying for anyone who believes in free speech. And what's so scary is that these aren't happening in authoritarian regimes we read about. They're happening in the so-called free world. Let's start in Canada with the case of Eve Engler.
This is a landmark case analyzed by civil rights lawyer Dimitri Lascaris. Eve Engler was convicted of harassment and obstructing a peace officer. Now, usually those charges imply some kind of physical confrontation, shoving an officer, blocking a car. But what did Engler actually do? He used an email campaign.
Wait, he was convicted for sending emails?
Not even sending them all himself. He used a tool called Action Network. It's a standard advocacy tool. Unions use it. Environmental groups use it. It allows you to set up a form letter so that your supporters can click a button and send an email to a public official.
Right. I've used those.
Everyone has. Engler encouraged people to email a police officer about a dropped charge regarding a hate crime. It was basic political petitioning. Hey, officer, why did you drop this charge? We, the public, would like you to look into it.
That seems like a core function of democracy.
You would think so. But the judge ruled that this polite email campaign constituted criminal harassment because it stressed the police officer. The officer testified that the volume of emails caused him stress.
Stress the police. If a police officer is stressed by emails, how are they supposed to handle actual criminals? That seems incredibly fragile for law enforcement.
That was exactly Dimitri Lascaris' point. It sets a terrifyingly dangerous precedent where Political petitioning, the act of asking your government to redress a grievance, is now criminal harassment if enough people do it. It criminalizes volume. If one person complains, it's free speech. If 1,000 people complain, it's harassment.
Unbelievable. And who was the antagonist here?
The antagonist is interesting, a woman named Dalia Kurtz. She's a pro-Israel influencer who has posted photos with Mossad agents and has called Palestinians thirsty for blood. She initiated the complaint against Engler, but then refused to testify in court.
Why refuse to testify if she was the supposed victim?
Well, one can only speculate. But it's likely because her own social media history, her calls for violence, her connections to intelligence agencies would have been absolutely destroyed in cross-examination. She didn't want to be questioned. Yet despite her refusing to show up, Engler was still convicted. The system protected the accuser and punished the activist for using email.
Okay, moving across the globe to Australia, we have the case of Antoinette Lattouf. She was a journalist for the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. This is their equivalent at the BBC. She was fired. And why? For reporting false news? No. She shared a Human Rights Watch report on starvation in Gaza on her private Instagram account.
A report that her own news station had already covered. It's not like she was sharing conspiracy theories. She shared a report from one of the most respected human rights organizations on Earth.
Yeah.
But she was fired. She sued for unlawful termination, and she won. The court found she was the victim of an orchestrated campaign.
And thanks to the court case, we know who orchestrated it, a WhatsApp group called Lawyers for Israel.
Correct. This wasn't just random listener complaints. This was a coordinated, targeted attack by a group of legal professionals. They threatened ABC management. They bombarded them with coordinated complaints to create the illusion of public outrage where there was none. And here's the kicker. Lattouf won $145,000 in damages, but ABC, a taxpayer-funded entity, spent $1.7 million to defend the firing.
They spent nearly $2 million of public money to silence a journalist for sharing a Human Rights Watch report. That is ideological capture of a public institution. They would rather burn taxpayer cash than allow a journalist to speak the truth about starvation.
It is. It sends a message to every other journalist in Australia. Keep your mouth shut or we will ruin you, and we don't care how much it costs us. It's a chilling effect weaponized.
And it's not just Australia or Canada. Look at the U.S. We have secret recordings now of Senator Ted Cruz. This one just blew my mind. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, who we quoted earlier regarding the military situation, was up for a top national security post.
And Davis is a solid candidate. He's a combat veteran, a tank commander, a sober analyst. He's exactly the kind of guy you want in the room to prevent unnecessary wars. He's not an ideologue.
And Ted Cruz bragged to donors, you have the tape, that he personally blocked Davis's nomination. And the reason? Because Davis was a critic of Israel.
Not because he was unqualified. Not because he was a risk to America, but because he wasn't pro-Israel enough.
I mean, think about the implications of that. A United States senator is vetting American national security officials based on their perceived loyalty to a foreign nation.
Davis's reaction was spot on. He pointed out that a sitting U.S. senator from Texas was prioritizing the preferences of Benjamin Netanyahu over American national security expertise. It raises the fundamental question, who are these officials working for? If you can be blacklisted from serving your own country because you criticized another country's war crimes, are you really a sovereign nation?
And if you think you can talk about this privately, think again. We have a new lawsuit in San Francisco regarding WhatsApp. Most people think WhatsApp is safe. End-to-end encryption, right? That's the promise.
That's the marketing. But a new lawsuit claims Meta, the parent company, can read end-to-end encrypted messages. It relies on whistleblowers who say there is a backdoor for employees to access messages, even deleted ones, in real time.
Even deleted messages? How is that possible?
Yes. The claim is that when you hit delete, it disappears from your screen, but it remains on the server, accessible to content moderators and, by extension, to intelligence agencies with a warrant or a request. Elon Musk weighed in on this, tweeting simply, WhatsApp is not secure.
So if this is true, it means there is no private sphere left. If you are an activist in a planned community in Gaza, or a journalist in Australia, or just a citizen in Canada emailing the police, the system is watching and the system is weaponized.
It creates a panopticon. If you know you are being watched, you self-censor. You don't send that email. You don't share that report. And that is how they win. Not by arresting everyone, but by making everyone afraid to speak.
Before we wrap up, we have to touch on Europe's internal decline. It seems the far right is rising and the old alliances are fraying. We have this bizarre story about Greenland.
It's the return of a Trump classic. Jonas Elvander, a Swedish activist, describes deep buyer's remorse regarding NATO in Scandinavia. But the headline is Trump's renewed push to buy Greenland.
He wants to buy Greenland again. I thought that was a joke from his first term.
He is deadly serious. Strategically for the U.S., it makes a certain kind of sense. It controls the Arctic passages. But the U.S. is exerting massive pressure on Denmark. Meanwhile, Sweden is cutting its welfare state to the bone to fund a military buildup, 5% of GDP that was demanded by the U.S. They are dismantling the famous Nordic model to buy American weapons.
But the darker story in Sweden is the Nazi scandal. This sounds like something out of a movie. A Swedish minister's son was exposed as a member of a Nazi fight club.
These are called active clubs. They're paramilitary training groups. They meet in gyms, they train in combat sports, and they are explicitly neo-Nazi. And Elvander's research links this specific movement directly to Ukraine.
How does it link to Ukraine?
Robert Rundo, the American founder of the movement, used Ukraine as his inspiration. He looked at groups like Azov and said, we can do that here. So you have a direct pipeline of extremist ideology and combat tactics blowing back from the war in Ukraine into the heart of Scandinavian politics. And because the Western media is so pro-Ukraine, there's been a total blackout on this connection. You have a minister's son training for race war, and nobody wants to talk about where the ideology came from.
Okay, let's unpack all of this. We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We've gone from the deck of an aircraft carrier to the gold vaults of Europe, from the rubble of Gaza to the courtrooms of Canada. Let's try to bring it all together. What is the synthesis here?
The big picture is this. We are witnessing a system in crisis, trying to hold itself together with force. The U.S. is risking a carrier on Armada in the Persian Gulf to enforce an economic order that is actively crumbling. We know it's crumbling because gold is at $5,000 and the Treasury Secretary is bragging about destroying currencies to save the dollar.
And simultaneously, to manage the fallout of these wars, they are implementing this board of peace in Gaza that essentially privatizes the occupation, turning it into a corporate asset.
Correct. And to stop anyone from pointing out how insane this all is, they are silencing dissenters in Western democracies, criminalizing emails in Canada, firing journalists in Australia, and blacklisting national security experts in the U.S. They are trying to plug the leaks in the ship by throwing the crew overboard.
So the Armada isn't just ships, it's the desperate last stand of a unipolar world.
Exactly. We're witnessing the simultaneous weaponization of the dollar, the military, and the justice system. They are all being deployed at once because the system is under existential threat. It's not a sign of strength. It's a sign of panic.
That is a heavy realization.
It is. And I want to leave the listener with this final provocation. We talk about defending the free world in the Persian Gulf. We say we are there to protect democracy against the mullahs. But if a polite email is a crime in Canada, and a Human Rights Watch post is a firing offense in Australia, and a U.S. senator can block you from serving your country for not being pro-Israel enough, are we still the free world we claim to be defending? Or have we become something else entirely while we weren't looking?
Something to mull over as you watch the news this week. If you found this analysis valuable, hit the plus or follow button on your podcast app and give us a like. It really helps us keep stripping away the noise.
Subscribe to the Hot News channel for more deep dives. We'll be watching the wires.
Until we meet again, goodbye.